with Will on 531 VI.
It is 8:33 for Tuesday, the 30th of September. I'm William Terite, talofa koutou. Welcome in if you are just joining us. Now, we head to Christchurch now, where Fionna Chapman is putting her hand up, bringing her Pacifica heritage and decades of experience in community development, health and governance to the table. She's worked nationally with neighbours Aotearoa and child-rich communities, locally with grassroots groups, and even helped select the board of Basketball New Zealand. Living in an intergenerational family, she says connection across all ages is the heart of her vision. She joins us now to have a talanoa about why she's running. Talofa lava, thank you very much for your time.
Manahoia, William. Thanks for having me.
Look, before we get into it, let's just go with a wee bit of a background into yourself, if you don't mind starting there, for those that are fresh.
What would you like to know?
Well, just tell us about, your heritage, where you come from.
Awesome. So, I'm born and raised in Christchurch, Aotearoa. My dad, both my parents are Sāmoan. My dad comes from the beautiful village of Lalumanu, Aleipata in Samoa. And my mum is an Aotearoa. She's from Whasita, and she passed earlier this year. As you've mentioned, I live in an intergenerational household, and we made that decision to move in together to care for my parents as they've gotten older. And I've got my youngest daughter living with me and her partner and her baby as well. So, that's our household, like, a lot of Pacific families.
Yes, certainly. It certainly is. Look, let's go there in terms of where you're running and why on earth would you want to?
I guess, I've always worked in the community. Well, when I say work, a lot of it's free work. And so my paid position is working for the Christchurch Methodist Mission here in Christchurch, and we do lots of community projects where we fill the gaps. And so I see the reason. I've had a friend who has actually been nagging me 3 elections ago to run for community board, and this year I stepped down because I've done my terms on the Canterbury Basketball Board. I thought, I've got a little bit of capacity to do this. So I said, okay, I will run for community board, and I kind of see it as an extension of my volunteer work, but also my paid work. And so I decided to put my hand up, and then, they were like, well, we don't actually have anyone running for council in the area that you're working in. Why don't you put your name forward for that? So I was like, okay. And so that was kind of how it all sort of started. And yeah, here I am.
Awesome. Okay, so candidate for Burwood Ward. I just want to highlight that particular feature. In terms of, as you mentioned, does that put you in the prime position or driver's seat for this?
Not really, but the ward that I'm in covers about 17,000 people, and in that 17,000, it's about 21% of our demographic is Māori and Pacifica in there, but we really need our people to vote. So, and I've also heard it's very hard to knock an incumbent off. So, at least if I get onto community board, it'll just sort of up the profile, might motivate our people to get out and vote. So that's the aim, just sort of be a wee bit more visible than, the usual community work that I'm doing. And hopefully the next round of elections will be able to get in there.
Certainly. With all of that in mind, give us a bit of sense as to some of the pressing issues in your community at the moment. Before I don't want to touch on it, Christchurch in general, but just more specifically about your area.
Well, like I said, our ward is very diverse. So we've got, from Aranui, which is a very low socio-economic demographic, and then we've got the other extreme where the top of the Burwood ward is Preston's Park, so we're looking at a very high demographic. So it's trying to be span across the social economic across all those wards.
Sure. Okay, and with all of that in mind, I mean, Christchurch is becoming more diverse, and yet some communities still feel invisible in local politics. What's your plan there, I suppose, to ensure that, say, Pacifica and other minority voices aren't just consulted but genuinely have influence?
Do you repeat the question again?
Sure. So Christchurch is becoming more diverse. Some communities, though, still feel invisible in local politics. I suppose what's your plan, or what would you like to bring to ensure Pacifica and other voices aren't just consulted but genuinely have influence?
Sure. Well, the demographic that I'm also in is an area where it was hit very hard post-earthquake. So it's, some of the services that we'd lost during or after the earthquake were things like the bus service, and that seems to be what I'm hearing loads of while I'm doing the door knocking, and so when I'm door knocking, a lot of our less mobile and our older community, and it's not just our Pacific community, are finding it hard to go to hospital visits because transport is a really big issue, and it's made up of a lot of those little wee streets that have been hit hard, so it's hard to even just walk out the door because our roads haven't been fixed. So there's things like that, but I think I bring a grassroots voice to the table, the decision making table.
I see.
So it's that kind of stuff, and just being in connection with our community.
Sure. And again, just on Pacifica heritage, I suppose, is there a cultural lens that would shape the way you'd approach, say, decision-making in a city where Pacifica voices are often perhaps underrepresented?
I actually took it for granted that I would expect anyone around the decision-making table would be making decisions for the betterment of the whole community. But that's something that I've learned over the years that we just do naturally as Pacific. So we take in consideration the thoughts and the needs of others before our own. So I think that's something I think is a real strength for any Pacific person who's sitting around those, the decision-making table. So it's about the collective, and I guess I've chosen to run with Labour and for People's Choice. Sure. Because it's for the greater good and for everybody else, not just ourselves. So yeah.
And living in an intergenerational family, as you alluded to, I suppose also gives you that unique perspective. How might that shape you in your thinking around, say, housing, urban design, social infrastructure for Christchurch?
I think it brings the voice of all the different generations. So what I think might be quite good for the younger people is not necessarily good for the younger people how they see it. And same with having my dad's generation in there, living in the household, is that we all come with varying degrees of insight or knowledge or what they think or what we think is best for our own generation. So I think that gives me a unique advantage as well, is because I'm always listening to, although my children probably don't think so, but listening to that younger voice, and then also listening to that older voice as well in our household.
And look, just more Christchurch general questions that I'd like to just hit you with in terms of getting your perspective on it. Now, the Council's pre-election report highlights billions of dollars in public assets in pressing infrastructure decisions. What's one area you think Christchurch has consistently got wrong since the earthquakes?
Ooh, nice question. Well, the current sitting councillors, Mayor included, are probably they're looking at selling off our assets, and I think like I've alluded to, we like the like-minded people within the People's Choice, and for Labour, we want to hold on to those assets, because if we sell those off, we lose control of those assets for our future generations. So we really want to hold on to that and ensure that we do have that for future investment of our communities. Yeah.
And
So that's probably a big, huge focus for us, is to make sure we don't sell those assets.
sure, yeah, sure. And look, this is a problem that's plaguing the country nationwide. I'm talking about rates affordability. It also looks as though Christchurch, it's a bit of a tension there. I mean, how would you balance, say, investing in projects while keeping rates manageable for ordinary families?
Can't put rates caps on things that um, we've got such a huge debt that we've got to try and balance out how we pay off our debt, but also keep the services that we need. So, I think it's being able to communicate clearly with our community where our money is being spent and why we have such a huge debt. So, I think communication is really key, rather than, because the cost of living is so expensive at the moment. But if we try and explain to our community that, sometimes it would be quite good to explain to them, well, if you want to lower rates, what other services from the council are we going to lose? And I think that kind of information hasn't been relayed across. And also, as council, we probably need to push central government a wee bit more to get funding, spent directly into our city. So I think language is really key, because all we see is the bill to pay for our rates, but what we don't actually see is the huge spend and the huge debt that we need to pay off before we start losing our services.
And look, this is a broad question, but Pacifica communities, it's no secret, often face systemic barriers around health, housing, income. Local government, of course, can't solve everything. A lot of that lies in central government. But where do you see council's role in changing those realities at the local level, or at least in trying to improve Pacifica outcomes?
We need to. I feel like we've moved away from community engagement and community-led type initiatives. So giving more power to the people to find their own solutions in terms of community well-being, rather than taking those decisions away. So the council have made steps towards that, but it's not enough, because people are losing confidence. People are not, some of the information is not getting across to our community. So I think, that kind of stuff we need to encourage a wee bit more.
Certainly. And look, as you mentioned, just finally before we wrap up, low voter turnout. We've seen some of the stats come out already. Doesn't look particularly flash, to no surprise, sadly, when it comes to our Pacifica people. What's your plea to those in your area to perhaps get out and vote, and what are you doing to try and shift that dial?
Sure. Well, doing radio interviews like this that'll reach our community. But, the door knocking, our people really appreciate the door knocking. It's going into our churches, and I hate having to use those cliche things, but, it's word of mouth. Our community do networking a wee bit different than the traditional ways of networking, but it's actually trying to explain to them in easy ways the role of local body, community boards and council. So it's actually just getting in there and explaining, and actually putting it into terms on how it affects them. So things like the rubbish services, things like some of the events, like Polyfest and, our leagues, Pacific League series and stuff that we have here. So, just it's changing the language that we use, but also leading by example, just getting out and talking to people, and then getting people on side to help you out to explain as well.
Indeed. Hey, thank you very much. I enjoyed this talanoa, and you laying out a bit of your vision as well. I really appreciate it. And all the best.
Thank you, William. Thanks.